Massive breaking news in the gold and silver community. This is a story we need to follow closely. Legal tender legislation, it's taking over in the United States. We're going to give you all the examples, the latest news from an expert in the field. We're also going to talk about why this is so important, why legal tender legislation should be a big deal to you as a precious metals investor. Today, we are joined by Daniel Diaz. He's with the Citizens for Sound Money. Let's see if we can pull him up here. Hello, Daniel. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Ron. Good to be back.
Hey, brother. I know you're going to give us all the details about what's going on in the country right now. This is big, big news. But first, I want to ask you why. Why should a precious metals investor even care if their state is passing legal tender legislation?
Yeah, so that's a question that comes up a lot when we are posting our victories on X and a question that come up when I'm speaking. And one of the main reasons is because we're trying to make gold and silver legal tender again and create a sound money economy. So look, 78% of Americans, a study came out last year in the summer that says that they're living paycheck to paycheck. 78% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck with not $1,000 to their name. So if you walk into a room and you do a quick glance, 4 out of 5 people are broke. They're living paycheck to paycheck, and they don't know why. They don't understand that what's happening is that the dollar is being printed into oblivion, and people are losing their purchasing power and what I call their economic energy. So right now, gold and silver is categorized as personal property. It's not categorized as money. And the legal tender legislation that's going around the country, as of today, there are now 11 states that have made gold and silver legal tender. We'll get to that in a minute. And by making gold and silver legal tender, they're elevating it from being personal property, which it's taxed at a different level. And it also gives people consumer protections because when gold and silver is considered a barter transaction, if you're trading back and forth for goods and services, by elevating it to money, it's treated as Federal Reserve, the same as Federal Reserve notes. So it's extremely important to bring back a sound money economy and to get people to feel confident in using gold and silver, that the states also accept them, whether initially they're forced to accept it or it's voluntary, which most states are doing. Like, for example, Missouri, the state's not going to accept physical gold and silver for the payment of taxes. They will only accept electronic gold and silver for the payment of taxes. Florida, it's optional for any municipality all the way up to the state government, counties, and even public schools to accept gold and silver. But there's a qualification. They have to have an account, what they call in Florida, a qualified public depository, which basically means they have to open up an account with a bank or credit union that can hold qualified public funds. So it's important to, I can't hear you. You're muted.
I'm sorry. I muted my microphone. You said something earlier that blew me away. And then I want to get in, but you said that 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. So if I walk into a church or a bar or wherever, basically 4 out of 5 of those people are broke. Is it too harsh to say? You're the guy with Citizens for Sound Money. So is it too harsh to say that those 4 out of 5 people are basically living as debt slaves to a certain degree?
It's not hard. It's the truth. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
Because the dollar isn't money. The dollar is debt. It's a currency.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're working and they don't have enough money to buy any real property that's going to appreciate in value. And so they work for paper money, and then it just gets debased and debased and debased over time.
Correct.
Is that okay?
100%. And it's even
worse. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah. No. And it's not even, I wouldn't even call it debasing. I call it theft. When you put your economic energy, so this is something that I've been using recently when I speak publicly at conferences or whatever. I am differentiating money from currency, and the way I do that is by focusing in on economic energy. So where you focus and you put your economic energy is where your treasures are stored. So go ahead, show that round.
Well, yeah, so there's a 1 ounce silver. So if you come over today, although it's going to be a long flight because I think you're in Florida, but if you come over today and cut my grass and I give you this, right, very likely 20 years from now, this is still going to have the same value. Whereas if I give you $35 cash, I say, here, Daniel, I'm going to pay you with some of this stuff, and your eyes light up. Where do you think it's going to be in 20 years? Is that a good example of what you're talking about?
In 20 years, I'm not even sure if we'll have the same monetary system. I mean, look, the world's moving towards a digitized commodity world. Every central bank in the world is buying gold and silver hand over fist. Or was it April? April or May, I was on recently with Andy Scheckman, and it was the COMEX's largest delivery of gold in U.S. history. I think it's the most gold the U.S. has bought in 30 or 40 years. Look, if you get out of your daily life and just start looking what the world is doing, every major central bank in the world is buying gold hand over fist. They're turning in and not buying U.S. treasuries. The dollar dominance is disappearing, and they're moving to real money. And then Basel III is elevating gold from a commodity to a class 1 asset, which basically is the same as currency. The head of the Bank of International Settlements said, I think earlier this year, that gold is acting more like a currency than a commodity.
So can I ask you a question? Quickly, and then I promise to the viewer, and thank you to our viewers for being here. Thank you for being in the basement. You're the most important part, but I'm wondering if they have the same question I do, and that's about this. Is it Basel III? From what I understand, that will be in July or sometime this summer, and that the United States was the last holdout, basically, is what I understand, and then that will then elevate gold to this tier 1 asset, like the same thing as cash or U.S. bonds. Why is that not being made a big deal, a bigger deal of in the gold and silver community?
Well, the Basel III is more of like the rules for the large banks, institutional banks, and essentially what they're doing is it's how they hold money on their balance sheet, and it can right now. Gold is treated as a commodity on the balance sheet, and by elevating to tier 1, it's considered like a currency, liquid assets. So it's just that's an important distinction, because it's essentially what we're doing with legislation too, right? It's going from a commodity to money, right? And there's the same thing we're doing at a smaller level. Instead of all the banks around the world agreeing, the states are doing it as well to protect themselves and to give people the confidence to use gold and silver in transactions.
Okay. So I promised everybody that we would talk about this massive legislative wave that's going across the United States, gold and silver legal tender. I think there's nobody better to talk to than to you. I know there's some breaking news. It's a fluid situation which develops. What's the latest that you can share with us in terms of what you're seeing out there right now, Daniel?
The latest is happened yesterday. Texas is the 5th state this year to make gold and silver legal tender. So far this year, we had Alabama, Idaho, Florida, Missouri, and now Texas. The 2 largest Republican states in the country have now made gold and silver legal tender and electronic payment systems transferring the ownership of gold and silver as legal tender. Same thing with Missouri. Alabama and Idaho only made physical gold and silver legal tender.
And I just want to throw one thing in that shocked me when I learned it. The size of the economies in both Texas and Florida are staggering. I don't know the details, but it's this thing.
Florida's 1.7 trillion, and we're the 15th largest economy in the world if we were a country.
Thank you.
I'm looking up Texas right now. Texas GDP is 2.7 trillion. Okay. So if you add Florida together, 1.7 trillion plus 2.7 trillion, that's 4.4 trillion. And now I'm looking at the largest GDPs in the world for the countries. GDP countries. And let's see where we are on the country list. So if Texas and Florida united their GDPs, we would be the fourth largest country in the world in GDP, right below Germany.
So this is a big deal, right? I mean, this isn't just cowboys and orange juice. This is like a massive, massive deal that these two states are moving forward with legal tender legislation.
Yeah, and when you add the other 9 states' GDPs together, that puts us at number 3, right behind China.
Wow!
Yeah. So the 11 states in the United States that have made gold and silver legal tender would be the 3rd largest economy in the world, behind China and the United States.
Yeah, and this can only add to the demand for gold and silver, I would imagine, right? I'll let you talk more about the specifics to the extent that you're, able to in regards to what's happening in each of these states. But I know, like for instance, Florida. You live in Florida, so I would imagine you're probably very, very in tune with what's going on there.
I was there from day one. I mean, I helped draft the legislation with the writers and the sponsors and the government. I mean, I know the Florida bill better than any other bill, and I think the next best bill would be Texas, because I've been helping out on Texas, and then Missouri. Yeah. So, in Florida is 36 pages. All the other states have a few page bills, but Florida has done something that no other state has done, and I think Florida has created a model legislation for electronic transfer systems of gold and silver.
Okay. So how does it work? What would if I'm living in Florida, which I'm not? I live in Missouri. Maybe you can tell me what to expect in Missouri. But if I'm living in Florida and I'm a gold and silver person, what kind of changes? I mean, how's it going to impact someone who's a Floridian?
So it's now law in Florida, and the law says it doesn't go into effect until July 1st. So the reason for that is because of the regulatory framework that we established for companies that are transfer gold and silver electronically. So there's 2 parts to the Florida bill, Missouri bill, and Texas bill. You have the physical side, which I'll get into second, because that's pretty easy. And then there's the digital side. The digital side is where I think Florida is leading the country, because what we've done is we've integrated gold and silver companies into current Florida regulatory framework for transferring dollars. So all we did was we modified the regulatory framework in Florida to accept gold and silver custodians and gold and silver transactions. We got the one thing we needed to get rid of was FDIC to qualify as a money services business and custodian. And then all they have to do in Florida, let's say Kinesis or Glint or Alpine Gold Exchange with the UPMA want to start transacting digitally. They go into the state of Florida. They register as a money services business. I think the fee to become a MSB is $100,000, and you need to have $3 million in assets. That's it. Pretty low bar for companies. And then if you operate in the state of Florida, you have to have gold. So you can either contract with a company that currently is a custodian, licensed custodian, or you can open up your own vault in Florida and have the gold and silver. The legislation is unique. It says it has to be close enough to police stations and emergency services for security purposes. I mean, there's a lot more to it, but that's the 10,000-foot view.
Gist of it. Yeah,
that's the gist of it. I mean, there's other things about states and trusts. Right. You don't have to worry about that. Now, on the physical side, this is where it got interesting in Florida. We've been working with the Senate staff for months, and the third to last iteration of the bill, after meeting with them and we got 95% of what we wanted, came in with a provision out of left field. Nobody, Economic War Rooms, Christian Family Coalition, us, the government, nobody talked to these drafters about this issue. And I called the drafters of the bill. I'm like, what does this line do? Why did you put it in here? What's your rationale? The rationale it was a 1-sentence liner, and it changed to like a 10-sentence liner on the bill. The 1-sentence liner would have nullified the entire purpose of the bill, making nothing legal tender. Basically, it said that the only thing that would be considered legal tender in Florida would be gold and silver ingots, bars, rounds, or whatever that did not have any design. It could only have the weight and purity stamped on it. Well, there's not a single product in the world that only has the weight and purity stuck on it. Everything has a mint mark. So We tried to push back on that. They came back with a different version that allows a mint mark. So now bars can be legal tender, and that's it. I mean, and U.S. minted coin is already legal tender. There's a provision in the Florida bill. So we tried to push that and get that changed, but it was so late in the legislative session that we just said, you know what? We'll come back next year and fix it. Let's just get this through. It's the most robust legislation in the country electronically. We're making some physical gold and silver legal tender. And then the unintended consequence of this provision being in Florida was Texas took that same provision and put it into Texas. So the bill that passed yesterday, only 5%, not 5 to 10% of physical bullion, basically bars with no design, only a mint mark, weight, and purity, are legal tender, and electronic currencies legal tender.
Let me ask you a question. I'm going to pull up my channel sponsor for gold and silver here, First Mint, and I don't know if you can see this on the screen, but hold on. Let me get to the right. Let me go to bars because they have bars. I'm just wondering if these bars would qualify. If this, to give everybody a visual, there's a 10-ounce. I don't know if you can see it on the screen.
If that is their mint mark, yes, that would qualify as legal tender.
Okay. And while we're here, if it's okay, I just want to say thank you to the channel sponsor, First Mint. They are a mint in Las Vegas, Nevada, owned by First Majestic Silver, Keith Neumeyer's company. They mine silver in Mexico, ship it to Nevada, and have it made into these world-class silver bullion products. It's literally from the mine to the mint. So if you buy silver from First Mint, it's never touched the COMEX or the LBMA. There's their Buffalo Round, my personal favorite, with the Indian design. They got Year of the Snake, and these are all unique to First Mint. So thank you, Daniel, for letting me know that if you're in Florida or Texas, you likely can use those First Mint bars. Will qualify as legal tender.
Yeah, but those rounds that they have would not qualify as legal tender.
Because they have a design on them. But that'll get changed next year. Yeah.
Thank you. In Florida, Texas only meets every other year. So they're going to have to deal with that for 2 years in Texas till we're able to get back over there and change it. So Florida, we're definitely going to try to start changing it when they have committee weeks starting in, I think it's August or September this year.
Okay.
So hopefully before session starts January, we'll already have the law changed. So that's the situation in Texas and Florida. Electronic transfer is legal tender. Some bars are legal tender. Now, Missouri hit us a grand slam. Not only do they make electronic
my home state,
not only have they made electronic currency not legal tender, but being accepted by the state as legal tender. It's a very nuanced. As versus being legal tender is the difference between constitutional and not constitutional. You can't make electronic currency legal tender because that would be a bill of credit. If you treat it, if you're just saying that you're accepting it for payment as legal tender, that's fine. It's basically saying that the state is recognizing gold and silver as legal tender. And then bullion, all bullion in Missouri is legal tender. All bullion in Idaho is legal tender. And I haven't read the Alabama bill, but I'm assuming it's similar. Let me see. I'm just going to scan it quick. It looks like. Yeah, refined gold bullion specie. Yep. So Alabama, all bullion is legal tender in Alabama. So 3 of the 5 states, all bullion is legal tender physical. 3 states electronic, and then Arkansas, because even though Arkansas made legal tender, gold and silver legal tender 2 years ago, this year they also made electronic transfer of gold and silver legal tender. So there's 4 states that have made electronic systems, not electronic currency, electronic systems. To transfer legal tender ownership for payment of debts and so forth. So super exciting. We've almost doubled the amount of states. We had 6 last year that made gold and silver legal tender, and then we added 5 more. That's an 88% increase. Is that right? Hold on. 6 divided by 5 divided by 6. Other way around. 6 divided by 5. No, sorry. You know what? I'm doing my math wrong. There we go.
That would
83.
Yeah.
83.3%. So we increased the amount of states by 83%.
A little bit, a tad higher than the percentage of Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck. So
yeah. And you know, that's heartbreaking, man, for me, because when I'm traveling the country,
yeah,
like I first realized that the statistic was true. I had just read it last year in the summer, and I went to my local watering hole and I was talking, and there's maybe 15 people at the bar, and it quickly dawned on me as we were talking about finances that I was the only person in that room that didn't live paycheck to paycheck
yeah,
out of 15 people at the bar. And that when I realized that, it smacked me in the face that this statistic is real.
mm-hmm.
And then traveling to Missouri, we had last year we had just got it through the Senate. I was meeting with the chief of staff of Democratic senator, and then I called an Uber, and the Uber driver passed me by, and I realized that the driver was a little older, was a brand new Escalade. So when I called the driver, came back, and she pulled up, and I got in, and I noticed she was quite old. I'm like, ma'am, do you mind if I ask you how old you are? She said, I'm 78 years old. I'm like,
Yeah,
why are you driving Uber? She's like, well, I'm a widow, and my husband's Social Security, my Social Security, and our retirement doesn't pay enough for me to eat. I have to
yeah,
drive Uber to eat. It pays for this car, and if I didn't drive Uber, I wouldn't have enough money. Same thing in Missouri. I had the manager of a hotel tell me that she's working 3 jobs. I'm like, why are you working 3 jobs as a manager of a hotel? She's like, I don't make enough to survive. And
mm-hmm.
then my last this year, I went to a meeting at a church in Florida where we're talking about people who want to get involved in government, and we're talking about what we're doing in Florida. I had this old lady started writing something. I thought she was taking notes. She slid it across to me and says, my name is Beth. I'm a 94-and-a-half-year-old woman, and I'm out spending my money. Please
Yeah,
share my story with people next time you talk about this. And
yeah,
this is the real story of 78% of Americans across the country. And they don't know why. And that's why it's so important to make gold and silver legal tender. It gives people the option to store their economic energy in
yeah.
something that preserves it. The only way to preserve your economic energy is to put it into money, because it's the only way to prevent the
Yeah.
theft of the government.
And you're not talking about like, oh, you're going to get rich by buying silver, or you're going to
No.
get rich by buying gold. But no, what you will do is preserve your wealth, preserve, like you call it, economic energy. My friend Bald Guy from Bald Guy Money says, like silver and gold are like batteries. Not that they store electric energy, though they do. Silver conducts it very well, but that they store economic energy, like you talk about. You can get a tube of American Silver Eagles and set it in the corner for 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, and it's going to preserve that economic energy. Because I talked about First Mint earlier. You got to think like with them, a lot of silver, for instance, comes from Mexico. There's a ton of work we never talk about in this business of silver and gold. How much actual work and effort and energy goes into getting the metals out of the ground, and then from there it's stored over
It's
years.
all economic energy. The digging
Yeah.
of the dirt, the processing, machines multiply.
The oil,
Machines are
yeah.
a force multiplier, right, of the economic energy. And that's another thing that I say. Like gold and silver is money. That's what you use to store your economic energy. Everything else that is an asset is a wealth generating asset.
Yeah.
Whether it's cryptocurrency, businesses, stocks, bonds. Those are force multipliers that could potentially increase your economic energy. So you store your gold and silver, or your economic energy in gold and silver, to protect it, and then you invest it to increase your economic energy.
Yeah. Well, Daniel, I want to say thank you for coming on. I do want to run out quickly to your website to show everyone the Citizens for Sound Money site. And here we go. Citizens, the number 4, Sound Money. One of my favorite parts about this site, besides this graphic, Sound Markets Require Sound Money, is if you go up to the top and you click on legislation and click on state list. I know it's very difficult to keep this updated, but you guys do a great job. It shows all the different states, and then down here, if I go down a little bit, there's an alphabetic list of states where, again, I know it's a fluid situation, so it's impossible to keep it 100% accurate, but it gives a pretty good update in terms of what's going on out there in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And we try to update it every week or every other week. We need to do a final update now that legislative session is ending for most states, like Ohio and Pennsylvania and California have year-long sessions. I think there's one or two other states. So we just got to do a final update with everything that's happened this year, and then that will be a resource for everybody to find the bills and the laws that have passed.
Sounds good. Give me 1 second before we say goodbye. I do want to say thank you to my other sponsors, Ledger, the cryptocurrency hardware wallet security leader, and MoonPay. MoonPay is the leading fintech company, over 30 million customers, 180 countries. Thank you to them for sponsoring Ron's Basement. Thank you to Daniel Diaz for coming on and giving us this update. It is a big deal. When I first got into gold and silver 20 years ago, no one ever talked about like any type of legislation. I mean, this is really the states taking back control and allowing their citizens and protecting their citizens and giving them the rights that the founding fathers set out in the Constitution, that silver and gold are money.
Yeah. And I just want to, before we close, I just got a question from an acquaintance of ours. John, he's watching, and he asked, how does legal tender status change the lives of those living paycheck to paycheck? And what that does, by making gold and silver legal tender, as I said earlier, one, it gives you legal protections, when you do transactions. Right now, like in the state of Florida, Florida has some of the worst barter laws. Same with Texas. I've done barter deals, and I've had people steal from those arrangements. It would have qualified as grand theft if it was there was a monetary transaction, but because it was barter, I had no legal recourse to prosecute or take them to criminal court. I can do civil court for contract law, but there are no legal protections. So that's one reason. And two, it gives confidence to people when you can pay your taxes in gold and silver. When the state starts accepting that, it gives people the confidence, like, hey, maybe I should use this. And then when you use it digitally with a debit card, you can start spending it. So it's what we're doing is elevating in the minds of the people from seeing gold and silver as a commodity to actually seeing it as what it's been for thousands of years: money, transactional, settling debts, and buying goods and services with it, electronically and physically. So, and we're giving people the option. We're not getting rid of the Federal Reserve System. We're creating a parallel economy, a sound money economy where people can put their paychecks, they can put their retirement checks. Don't put it all in there. I'm not giving financial advice. If you're on a fixed income, start putting a little bit into gold and silver to preserve it, because you're fixed, and gold and silver does fluctuate in the short term, but over the long term, it always keeps up with inflation. So how does it help people that are living paycheck to paycheck? Stop storing your money, your economic energy, in a theft tool. The dollar, the euro, the yen. It's a theft tool of the government and the banks and the central banks. Put it into gold and silver and preserve your economic energy.
And it's backed by nothing but debt, essentially. I mean, it's backed by nothing but debt. And, yes, being able, and I like what you say because it's true, right? And I'm not giving financial advice, but I think a person who lives their life and puts a certain portion of their money aside in either gold or silver on a quarterly, monthly, annual basis, when they get to be the ripe old age like I am, 55 years old, they'd be real darn happy they did it. So thank you, Daniel. It's always great to see you. I know you're working tirelessly out there for the silver and gold community. We appreciate you, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you for having me on.